When I reflect on that summer, I can't help but feel a mix of regret and nostalgia. My name is Logan, and what transpired between me and my Aunt Sophia was something I never planned or anticipated. It was a whirlwind of emotions, temptation, and decisions that have left a permanent mark on both of our lives. Sophia was my mother's younger sister, but with just a 17-year gap. Between us, she often felt more like a distant cousin. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can continue bringing you more fascinating, true stories like this one. And don't forget to watch this video till the end. And like the video because this story is going to be incredibly interesting. Please hit the like button to show your support. At 41, Sophia was effortlessly beautiful in a quiet, understated way. Her soft chestnut hair framed her face in waves, and her hazel eyes had this captivating way of looking at you as if they could see the parts of yourself you weren't ready to share. She lived alone in a charming little house just outside the city, having separated from her husband Michael a few years ago. When my parents suggested I spend the summer with her after I finished my graduate program, I was reluctant. I didn't know her well and felt awkward about intruding on her solitude, but they insisted, saying it would be good for me. So I reluctantly packed my bags and drove to her peaceful retreat. Sophia greeted me with her usual warmth, pulling me into a hug that smelled faintly of lavender and vanilla. Her home was just as I remembered. Cozy, filled with books, art supplies, and a sense of tranquility that made you want to stay. She led me to the guest room, offered me tea, and we spent the first evening catching up. Initially, things were uneventful. Sophia worked during the day, leaving me to my own devices. I explored the nearby trails, read a few of the books she had lying around, and tried to shake off the uncertainty weighing on me after finishing my program. But the more time I spent with her, the more I began to notice things I hadn't before: how she hummed while cooking, how her laughter could light up a room, and the effortless grace with which she carried herself. One evening it all changed. I couldn't sleep, the summer heat keeping me restless. So I went outside to cool off. As I walked past Sophia's bedroom window, I noticed the curtains were slightly open, and the soft light of herbside lamp spilled onto the lawn. I paused, my eyes drawn to the sight inside. Sophia was lying on her bed, scrolling through her phone. She wore a silk robe that clung to her body in a way that was both elegant and casual, slipping slightly off one shoulder beneath it. I caught a glimpse of her lace-trimmed bra and her bare legs stretched comfortably. There was an intimate air about her, a side of her I had never seen before. I should have walked away, but I was transfixed. I knew I was intruding, but I couldn't look away. I ducked behind a hedge, my heart racing with guilt and adrenaline, when I peeked again. She was unaware of my presence. The next day I couldn't get the image of her out of my head. It wasn't just her appearance. It was the vulnerability and intimacy of the moment that had stayed with me. That evening, as she sat reading in the living room, I found myself watching her more intently. "Everything okay?" she asked, looking up from her book. "Yeah," I said, quickly forcing a smile. "Just tired." She nodded, her gaze lingering on me for a moment before she returned to her book. That night, the tension was too much, and I found myself standing outside her bedroom door. I knocked softly, my heart pounding. "Come in," she called. I stepped inside, trying to act casual. She was sitting up in bed, her robe loosely tied. "Can't sleep?" she asked with a small smile. I shook my head and sat on the edge of her bed. "I thought I'd check on you, make sure you're okay." Her smile softened. "That's sweet, but I'm fine," she said, reaching out to touch my hand. The touch lingered, and the air between us was charged with an unspoken tension. Slowly, she tilted her head, her eyes searching mine. Before I knew it, I leaned in, our lips brushing softly. The kiss was excitant at first, but soon it deepened, a flood of emotions that neither of us could hold back. It was electric, suspended in time, but fleeting. As our lips parted, reality rushed back. Sophia pulled back slightly, her hand lingering on my cheek, her eyes wide with disbelief and longing. "Logan," she whispered, "what are we doing?" I didn't have an answer, only that the pull between us felt undeniable, something neither of us could suppress. "I don't know," I whispered, arid. "But it feels right." She shook her head, a small, conflicted smile playing on her lips. This is dangerous. You're my nephew, and you're—" I gently countered, "not just my aunt. You're more than that, and you know it." For a moment silence hung between us, heavy with unspoken words. Her hazel eyes glistened with unshed tears, and I could see the battle raging inside her between what she thought was right and what she wanted. Her breath was uneven, as if she was struggling to find the words to push me, a way to justify what she was feeling. "You're Sophia," I said softly, stepping closer. "You're not defined by a title or a role. You're an extraordinary person." Her lips quivered, and for a brief moment, she closed her eyes, trying to block out my words, my presence, but something in her shifted. She opened her eyes, looking at me with an intensity that sent a shiver through me. "This is wrong," she whispered. "Is it?" I asked gently. "Or is it wrong just because we've been taught to think it is?" Sophia turned away, her arms hugging herself as though trying to protect her heart. "You don't understand," she said. "I've spent my whole life trying to do what was expected, and look where it's gotten me." Her voice broke and she looked down, alone, invisible, forgotten. "You're not invisible to me," I said, my voice steady even as my heart raced. "You're the most incredible person I've ever known, and you deserve to be seen, to be loved for who you are." She turned back to me, her eyes searching mine as though seeking an answer to a question she couldn't voice. "But how?" she murmured. "How can this be anything but a mistake by letting it be real?" I said, stepping closer until we were inches apart, by choosing to feel the space between us dissolved as she let out a shaky breath. Slowly, hesitantly, I brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. She didn't pull away. Instead, she closed her eyes, leaning into the touch as if it was the first gesture of care she had felt in years. Her lips parted slightly, and before I could hesitate, I leaned in and kissed her forehead. It was a simple gesture, but tone that carried so much meaning. Her body trembled beneath my touch, and when I pulled back, her eyes were wide and full of emotion. "Sophia," she began, her voice trembling. "Tell me to stop," I whispered. "And I will." She didn't answer right away. Then slowly, she shook her head. "I don't want you to stop." The kiss that followed was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It began tentatively, as though we were both testing the fragile boundaries of themament. But as our lips met, the hesitation faded, replaced by a passion that neither of us could deny. Her hands moved to my shoulders, gripping me as if I were her anchor, and I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her closer. When we finally broke apart, her cheeks were flushed, and her breath was ragged. "This changes everything," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "Maybe," I admitted, "but maybe that's okay." She searched my eyes, looking for reassurance. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to let's feel this way. You don't have to have all the answers right now," I said softly, holding her hand. "We'll figure it out together." As the days passed, our connection deepened in ways I had never imagined, but with it came a growing sense of unease. The shadow of our situation loomed over us, threatening to tear apart the fragile bond we had created. Sophia's husband, Michael, my uncle, was distant and absorbed in his business, but knowing she was still married weighed heavily on both of us. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, the silence between us was thick with unspoken words. Sophia finally broke it. "Logan, I can't keep doing this," she said, her voice heavy with guilt. "I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not." I reached for her hand and squeezed it gently. "Then don't," I said. "You deserve more than this, more than being an afterthought in your own life." Tears welled in her eyes. "But what if I don't know how to leave you?" "Don't have to do it alone," I said firmly. "I'll be here for you every step of the way." The next day, tension hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. I found myself looking out the window towards Sophia's house, unable to focus on anything else. The weight of our shared moments still lingered in my mind, her trembling hands, the way her voice cracked when she said she didn't want me to stop by mid-afternoon. I couldn't wait any longer. I walked down the familiar path to her house, my steps slow and deliberate. Sophia was sitting on a weathered bench in the garden beneath the shade of a large oak tree. Her phone lay untouched beside her. She stared off into the distance, lost in thought. "Sophia," I called softly as I approached. She startled, her gaze snapping to mine. "Logan," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and something else. "Relief, perhaps." "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to check on you," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart raced. "After yesterday, I just wanted to make sure you were okay." She gave a shaky laugh. "Okay, I don't even know what that means anymore. Let me help you figure it out." I said, sitting down beside her. You don't have to do this alone. She hesitated, her fingers twisting together in her lap. I don't even know where to begin, she confessed. Everything feels so tangled, like no matter what I do, someone will get hurt. Maybe it's not about avoiding the pain, I said gently. Maybe it's about deciding what matters most and being willing to fight for it. Sophia looked at me, her hazel eyes filled with uncertainty and longing. And what if what matters most feels impossible, she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Then we make it possible, I said, reaching out to take her hand in mine, one step at a time. Her grip tightened on my hand, and for a moment, it felt like she was about to pull away. But then she let out a long, shaky breath and leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. Do you ever feel like you've spent your whole life being what other people expect you to be? She asked softly, like you've lost sight of who you are? Sometimes, I admitted, but being here with you, it feels like I'm starting to figure it out. She tilted her head to look at me, vulnerability and hope in her expression. You make it sound so simple. It's not, I said, but it's worth it. For a long moment we sat in silence, the weight of her unspoken thoughts pressing down on us. Finally she spoke, again her voice barely audible. I've spent so many years pretending to be happy, smiling at parties, posting dinners, laughing at jokes I didn't find funny, and all the while I felt hollow. You don't have to pretend with me, I said firmly. You can be yourself completely, unapologetically. Her eyes glistened with tears and she reached up to cut my face, her touch soft and tentative. Why are you doing this, Logan? She asked, her voice trembling. Why do you care so much? Because you deserve to be cared for, I said, to be seen, to be loved for who you are. Sophia's hand lingered on my cheek, her thumb brushing gently against my skin. Slowly, idly, she leaned in, her lips brushing mine in a kiss that was both tender and electrifying. The world around us seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of us connected in a way that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. When we finally pulled apart, her cheeks were flushed, her breath uneven. This is crazy, she murmured, a shaky laugh escaping her lips. What are we even doing? Something that feels right, I said, my voice steady, despite the rapid beating of my heart. Something that matters. She searched my eyes as though trying to make sense of this iCal moment. Logan, she began, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know if I can do this, if I can let myself have this. You don't have to have all the answers right now, I said. Weck, figure it out together, one step at a time. Before she could respond, the sharp trill of her phone interrupted the quiet. Sophia flinched, her hand darting to the device, almost as if it had burned her. She glanced at the screen, her expression tightening when she saw the caller. It's him, she said softly, frustration, Andre's signation in her voice. Do you want to answer it? I asked carefully. She hesitated for a moment before shaking her head. No, she said firmly, setting the phone face down on the table. Not right now. I nodded, a surge of admiration swelling in my chest. You're stronger than you think, I said. Don't let him take that from you. Her gaze softened and she reached out to take my hand once again. Thank you, Logan, she said, for being here. For being you. After those words, her hand lingered in mine and time seemed to slow. We sat there, the garden around us quiet except for the soft rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. Her fingers tightened around mine, a wordless connection that spoke volumes. I could feel her pulse under my touch, steady but quickening ever so slightly. Her breath shallow but deepening, mirrored Therasing thoughts in her mind. Sophia, I whispered, unable to hold back the words that had been swirling in my chest. I don't want this to just be a moment. I want to be here for you every step of the way. No more hiding. No more pretending. She looked at me, her eyes full of intensity, as if weighing my words and the promise they carried. I don't know what to do with this, Logan, she whispered, her vulnerability almost breaking me. I've spent so many years afraid of what I might feel, of what might happen if I let myself truly want something. But with you, I feel like I can finally breathe. I leaned forward, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, my fingers grazing her soft skin. Then don't be afraid, I said, let us figure this out together. Whatever happens, we'll face it as one. She hesitated, the weight of everything she had lived through in her marriage pressing down on her. But, slowly, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. We'll take it one day at a time. And that was it. The moment we had shared was a beginning. Not an end, the kiss. The closeness, the unspoken understanding between us, it was just the start of something deeper. Something real. She didn't need to say more. Neither did I. What we had, what we were beginning to build was enough. Over the next few weeks, Sophia and I grew closer. We took things slow, respecting each other's pace. But the connection between us was undeniable. We spent quiet mornings over coffee walks through the garden and late-night talks about the future. With each passing day, the weight of the past seemed to loosen its grip on her, allowing her to embrace a new version of herself, a version that allowed her to want more, to finally accept the love that had been in front of her all along. The greatest change, though, was in her, the guarded woman I had first met. Someone hiding behind walls built over years was no longer there. In her place was someone free, unburdened by the past, ready to face whatever came next. And it was in these quiet moments, in the spaces between our words, that I realized that I didn't just care for her. I loved her. It wasn't easy. Nothing worth having ever is. There were still hard conversations, moments of doubt and pressures from outside forces. Sophia's marriage, her distant relationship with Michael, and the guilt she felt didn't just disappear overnight, but the love we shared was undeniable, and we found strength in each other. Sophia never returned to the life she had known, and neither did I. We built something new, something ours, based on trust, honesty, and the promise to always stand by each other. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And for the first time in a long time, both of us were content with that. As the seasons changed and the years passed, we continued to grow together. We faced challenges, but always together. And whenever the world seemed overwhelming, when the pressures of everything outside threatened to tear us apart, we would look back at that evening in the garden, the moment we made a promise to each other, not of perfection but of authenticity, of love, and of a future worth fighting for. And so Sophia and I, two people from different lives with different stories, had found a way to write a new one. One filled with hope, love, and the unshakable belief that even the hardest paths can lead to the most beautiful destinations. And in the end, that was all that mattered.